My name is Ivy Calder, and I am 34 years old. My entire adult life has revolved around data, the numbers I turned into futures. But at 6:48 in the morning, right there in my childhood living room in Naperville, I understood one thing. A future can be stolen in just one night. My phone screen lit up in the cold light of a Chicago dawn, and the NorthLine Analytics account had only $103 left. Yesterday, it still had nearly $96,000. When I walked downstairs and showed it to my father, Russell didn't even blink. He simply leaned back in his chair and dropped a sentence as light as air. Money sitting still is a waste. Ivy, I used it for a bigger opportunity. Before I tell you what I did next, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to protect your future from your own family, hit like and subscribe. That wasn't the first time I saw my future being traded away. I was 10 years old when I first understood that in this house, anything that belonged to me could disappear at any moment. That day was my birthday. My grandfather from Milwaukee sent me a children's microscope set, the kind with a small reflector light underneath. I was mesmerized by that soft glow. It felt like I was touching a new world. No one else in the house understood. 1 week later, the microscope vanished from my desk. I remember that afternoon clearly. Our garage door was cracked open, the smell of gasoline mixed with cigarette smoke drifting out. My father, Russell, stood leaning against the wall, a half-burnt cigarette still between his fingers. When I asked, he didn't turn around and just said in a tired, raspy voice, "I borrowed it to show a buddy." He was extremely impressed. I believed him. Until I found the pawn shop receipt in his coat pocket, $40. I stood in the laundry room, my hands trembling as I held the paper, and for the first time that feeling flashed through me. What mattered to me meant nothing to him. Years later, that pattern repeated itself without anyone calling it by its real name. Russell borrowed the old laptop I needed for my master's thesis and returned it with the hard drive nearly destroyed. Another time, during a backyard barbecue, I heard him brag about a presentation I had created for my company during my first year out of school, speaking as if it were his big idea. People laughed and clinked glasses, and I just stood beside them, gripping a can of sparkling water so tightly, my knuckles turned white. Every time I reacted, my mother, Marianne, soothed me. "He's just proud of you, Ivy. Don't make it a big deal." But real pride doesn't make someone treat their daughter's work like a prop. And then I realized they never saw me as an adult. As I became better, earned more, and graduated with higher achievements, my silence was treated as a form of consent. Every time Russell said, "You can handle it," everyone in the family nodded, as if my capability was communal property, as if all my years of effort were simply the duty of the most capable child. I used to think I could tolerate it. I used to think it was just something small. Until that morning in Naperville, when I understood they had never intended to stop. And I had no idea. The next blow would destroy everything I had built over 15 years. The most painful thing isn't when they take something from you. It's when you realize they've been doing it your whole life. On a winter afternoon when I was 16 years old, the heater in our house hummed the same way my heartbeat did whenever I heard my father brag about me to relatives. Russell always loved turning me into proof of the Calder intelligence gene. That day, at a family gathering, he held up the school-level science research paper I had stayed up 3 nights to finish. He raised the sheet of paper like a trophy. "She's brilliant. I guided her through every chart," he said, sounding as cheerful as if he had just signed $1 million contract. The whole table applauded. No one asked me a single question. I just sat there, the cold from the orange juice compressing into my palm, and for the first time I felt how easily my achievements could be taken away. The year I entered college, Russell borrowed my student ID to buy a discounted laptop, which was really just a way to impress a new friend of his. When I asked why he didn't tell me beforehand, he laughed and patted my head. "Oh, come on. You're not missing a laptop. Don't be so difficult. And Marianne always had her signature explanation. Your father is proud of you. That's why. Proud. If pride made me feel like my skin was being peeled off layer by layer, then pride was something very painful. The first boundary I ever set was when they began treating me like a traitor. 2 years later, when I had just received my first paycheck in Chicago, my father showed up at the door of my small Logan Square apartment. It was so cold that day, the window glass was covered with a thin layer of frost. Yet he still stood outside with his hands in his pockets, his smile far too wide to be natural. I've got a big deal, he said, as soon as he walked in. Just $8,000. I'll pay it back in a few days. I didn't want to. But guilt had been planted in me since childhood, and I handed him the money. 1 month. Then 2. Not a single dollar came back. When I asked, his face darkened. A daughter counting pennies with her parents. Seriously? Marianne heard it and immediately wiped her tears. You're embarrassing your father in front of the relatives. People will laugh at our family. And that was the moment something inside me snapped, like a zipper being torn apart. I said the words I had never dared to say. From now on, I'm not giving anything else. The strange thing was, from that moment on, my family slowly went quiet. No check-ins. No need for me. And I realized their love had conditions. The condition was money. But that silence was only the step back before they lunged even harder. I wasn't planning to go. I had gotten used to keeping my distance to protect myself. But Logan, my younger brother, kept calling. For 3 days straight. Just come for 1 hour. Mom really misses you this time. I stood by the apartment window, looking out at State Street, where the last autumn leaves were being swept away in streaks of gold. Chicago this season was beautiful in a melancholy way. Wide, cold, and honest. I knew Logan wasn't like them. He had never taken advantage of me, never pushed me. He just wanted the family to fall apart a little less. A part of me still wanted to believe in something good. Another part stayed guarded. In the end, I went because sometimes you can't let go of the one person who stood by you when you were breaking. A house can be beautiful enough to stun you, but sometimes that beauty only exists to hide what's coming. I arrived in Naperville on an afternoon as gray and soft as a wool scarf. And I froze. The house my parents had just moved into was nothing like the place they had lived in their whole lives. Too big. Too luxurious. Too far beyond their income level. The hardwood floors gleamed like mirrors. The crystal chandeliers reflected the afternoon light into sharp, cold streaks on the walls. Everything felt like they were trying to prove something not to me, but to the entire world. Russell hugged me, the strong cologne nearly suffocating. My girl, Chicago State a genius, is here. He led me into the living room, showing me off to relatives like I was a brand he owned. One of my cousins asked me, "Does your company use 2-factor authentication through an app or through phone numbers?" I frowned. Who asks that at a birthday party? Marianne lightly touched my hand. You're always too sensitive. Everyone's just interested in your work. But their eyes weren't interested. It was something else. Something that made a chill crawl up my spine. And I didn't yet understand that. All those questions were just the setup for the blow they were about to strike across the life I had built. Sometimes, unexpected kindness. When I pushed the door open and stepped into my parents' new house in Naperville, warm laughter from the living room poured out like a stream of heated water. The golden lights hanging from the crystal ceiling fixtures spilled into every corner, turning the space into something too luxurious, too polished, to the point it didn't feel real. Marianne walked over and hugged me for so long it felt unbelievable. She hadn't hugged me that tightly in many years. "I'm so happy you're home," she whispered, her voice trembling softly, like she was holding back tears. I caught the familiar scent of her jasmine perfume, mixed with the buttery smell of freshly baked pastries. this warmth. Something about it felt wrong. It didn't resemble the years I had lived with them, where every hug came with conditions. Russell was entirely different. He walked over, slinging an arm around my shoulder as if we had never had a single moment of tension. "My daughter, Chicago's data genius." He said it so loudly that several relatives turned to look. He guided me around like he was showing off a trophy. The whole party was coated in a strange friendliness, relatives asking questions, acquaintances offering polite smiles, and even 2 aunts who had barely noticed me in the past, suddenly showing interest. Everything felt warm, smooth, and glamorous. And I didn't know why, but something inside me turned cold for a beat. Perfection always hides something. I had just picked up a glass of punch when a cousin from Milwaukee came over and asked a question that made me pause. "Ivy, does your company use two-factor authentication through an app or through text messages?" I blinked a few times, thinking I misheard. "Who asks that at a birthday party?" I gave a thin smile. "Through an app." He nodded, and his eyes weren't the casual kind, they were the memorizing kind. A moment later, a distant relative, someone who had met me only a few times, walked up. "What platform do your company servers run on? AWS or Google Cloud?" I tightened my grip on the glass. My entire life, no one had ever asked me any tech investment type of question at a family party. Never. Logan stood a few meters away, his eyes flicking toward me for a brief second, as if he wanted to say something, then staying silent. I noticed the stiffness in his smile. I told myself to stay calm. Maybe it was just curiosity. But Russell's expression, Marianne's shrug, the way they avoided my eyes, all of it fit together into a feeling I couldn't ignore. They were waiting for something from me. Not every malfunction appears at the perfect moment by coincidence. When the party was moving toward the dessert portion, Russell suddenly placed his hand on my shoulder, his face showing feigned panic. "Ivy! The laptop with your mom's childhood slideshow just froze. I was about to play it for everyone." Marianne placed a hand on her chest and exhaled shakily. "Oh dear, I spent all week preparing. Can you help us?" "Honey, you're the most skilled one in the family." A stone dropped in my stomach. I didn't like this feeling. But with all those eyes on me, I nodded. Russell led me into the office. The room was lit only by a warm desk lamp, the walls lined with family photo frames. On the table, Russell's old laptop sat cracked open as if waiting for me. I sat down. The machine was so slow it took 30 seconds for the screen to change. The slideshow was nowhere to be found, but I saw system files glitching everywhere. "We probably need to reinstall the network driver," I said, automatically slipping into problem-solving mode. I opened my personal email to retrieve an authentication code, then my company email, then OneDrive, then the internal security software. I typed each password, each two-factor code, not knowing that every keystroke was being recorded by something hidden beneath the operating system. Russell stood behind me, his breath faintly minty. "You're incredible. Thank goodness we have you." I forced a small smile, though unease prickled at me. Marianne stood in the doorway, clutching the hem of her blouse, her eyes red as if she were touched. Both of them watched me work as if I were unlocking a treasure vault. I had no idea I was unlocking one for them. Sometimes, the prettiest trap is the one you step into with a heart that wants to believe. When I typed the final password, the laptop stopped lagging. A minute later, the slideshow worked perfectly again. Marianne hugged me as if I had saved the entire party. "Thank you so much, Ivy." Russell laughed, patting my shoulder. "A real genius." They said the words I had always wanted to hear as a child, but hearing them at 34 made my skin crawl. I closed the laptop, not knowing that inside the machine, a program had recorded everything. Personal email passwords, company email passwords, two-factor tokens, cloud access, server details, Everything I had worked years to build, I didn't know I had just handed them the key to my entire life. Willingly. Unconditionally. In a room full of warm golden light. The irony is, people always disarm you with unexpected kindness. And I, even after everything, still forgot that for one brief moment. The next morning, I would understand why that party had been so sweet. There are mornings that don't begin with sunlight, but with the feeling that the world has just pulled the ground out from under your feet. The pale gray light of early morning filled the childhood living room where I was sleeping on the old wooden bed. The room was the same, the oak dresser, the curtains printed with a night sky, but the air was so heavy I could barely breathe. My phone vibrated nonstop beside me. I reached for it, half asleep, half awake. Bank notifications flashed one after another. Withdrawal. Large transaction. Transfer. My heart pounded like it wanted to burst through my chest. I opened the banking app. Balance. $103.27. I blinked. Yesterday, the NorthLine Analytics business account still held nearly $96,000. I tried logging in again. I switched networks. I turned airplane mode off and on. Still $103. The list of transactions stretched downward like a chain of metal, dragging me into the pit of my stomach. 8 transfers. All between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the morning. I placed a hand on my chest, trying to breathe. There was a truth I didn't want to admit, but it stood right in front of me. Some truths are so cold you have to lean on a wall just to keep from collapsing. I walked into the hallway, where the morning light shone on the family photos, the smiles now looking like strange, unfamiliar drawings. I called the Midwest Federal Bank hotline. The automated voice played distant and emotionless. A representative picked up. I spoke so fast I was almost gasping. I didn't make any of these transactions. Please check immediately. The sound of keyboard typing echoed like clashing metal. Then she spoke, in a tone professional enough to feel cruel. All transactions were verified correctly. Correct password, correct 2-factor authentication code, correct device, and the IP address matches your current location. I felt the blood in my body flow backward. I'm at my parents' house. Yes. The system confirms all activity originated from that address. When she asked if I wanted to close the account urgently, my hands were so cold I could barely press the screen. I whispered, "Close it. Now." The house felt like it was swallowing me whole. The most painful thing isn't the betrayal. It's when the betrayer is still having breakfast like nothing happened. I walked downstairs. Russell was reading the newspaper, one leg crossed, coffee steaming beside him. Marianne was cutting melon, the light glinting off the sharp blade. I stood there, feeling like a stranger in my own family. "Dad, what did you do with my money?" My voice cracked but didn't shake. Russell looked up, calm to a terrifying degree. "Oh, that?" he shrugged. "Money sitting still is a waste. I used it for a bigger opportunity. Family matters." Marianne immediately chimed in, her voice soaked in fake reassurance. "Don't be upset. Honey, we only want what's best for the family." A chill spread through me from the inside out. Not because of the money, but because of the absolute calm in their eyes, as if destroying my future was nothing more than a trivial inconvenience. Logan stood near the back door. His eyes were wide, full of fear. He wanted to say something, but all Russell had to do was glance at him, and Logan lowered his head. I looked at them one last time, the people who gave birth to me, and felt like I was staring at complete strangers. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I did the only thing that allowed me to keep my dignity. I turned and walked upstairs. There are moments when you know that if you stay one more minute, you'll lose yourself. I packed my things in 3 minutes. No emotion. Only the sound of zippers clicking against each other. When I pulled my suitcase down the stairs, Marianne watched me. She didn't reach out. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. Russell kept drinking his coffee as if I were just stepping out to buy milk. I opened the front door. No one said goodbye. The Chicago midday sky was so bright it hurt my eyes. I stood by my car for a few seconds to breathe. Then I closed the door, separating myself from that house the way one escapes a trap. I called Logan. "Did you hear anything about the big money deal Dad's been bragging about lately?" His voice trembled. "Yeah, but I thought he was lying. I didn't think he'd actually do it." I gripped the steering wheel tightly. "I understand." My next call was to Aunt Harper, the only person in the family who never got swept up in Russell's delusions. She picked up immediately. "Aunt, they took all my money." My voice was brittle, like it was about to break. She wasn't surprised. She didn't panic. She just sighed and said the sentence that made my whole body jolt. "Ivy, don't cry. This isn't a family issue anymore. This is a deliberate financial attack." In that moment, I understood. I was no longer the child. I was the target in a plan. And I would fight like someone who had been attacked, not like a daughter begging to be loved. And that was the moment I knew. Everything was about to get much worse. When you're betrayed by your own family, the first step to survival isn't forgiveness. It's becoming colder than they are. That afternoon, the sky over Naperville was covered in a gray layer like a mourning cloth someone forgot to take down. I drove to the law office whose address Aunt Harper had given me. It sat inside an old 2-story brick building, not flashy, but discreet and serious in a way that made you feel safe. Inside, the smell of paperwork and strong coffee blended together. White lights shone across the glass table surface, reflecting sharp, cold edges. A woman walked out, black hair tied neatly, a light gray blazer, eyes quick and sharp like a scalpel. Alina Cortez, cyber fraud specialist. "You're Ivy?" Her voice wasn't soft. It wasn't cold, just full of weight. "Yes." "Sit." We start immediately. No small talk. No, "I'm sorry." I handed her the old laptop I had taken from Russell's house. Alina put on thin gloves, opened the machine, her fingers gliding across the keys like someone checking the pulse of a criminal. The person who installed this knew exactly what they were doing. Her voice dropped low. "You mean..." Alina turned the screen toward me. A harmless-looking system file, named like a routine update. But inside was a keylogger that had been recording non-stop for nearly 2 weeks. "Every keystroke you made was captured," Alina said. "And the moment they got your 2-factor code matches the moment you logged in last night." I felt like someone had sucked all the air out of the room. Alina continued. "Ivy, this isn't someone clueless about technology. This was deliberate, prepared, and executed with enough precision for a court to classify it as premeditated intrusion." I placed my hands on my knees to keep them from shaking. Harper sat next to me, placing her hand over mine, squeezing gently. But her eyes were filled with tightly contained fury. It is bitter when a stranger sees the truth about your family more clearly than you ever did. Alina opened the log data. "Here," she said, pointing to the screen, "are all login timestamps, IP addresses, and devices. Every one of them leads back to the home of Russell Calder." Harper inhaled sharply, her hand curling into a fist. I felt like I was staring at an anatomical diagram of my own heart, every beat recorded in lines of code. "You'll need your banking transaction history," Alina said. I handed her my phone. She checked each entry, matching timestamps with the laptop's logs. "When you were sitting at the party last night," Alina said, "this program activated." They waited. Waited. "For what?" I asked. "For you to log into your email and cloud to fix the laptop," Alina replied. "So everything last night was a trap." Harper muttered a bitter sentence. "Russell's always been a good actor, good enough to think no one will ever catch on." Alina wrote into the case file. "Coordinated digital attack. Intentional." high familiarity with victim behavior. I sat there, listening to the sound of Alina's pen hitting paper, listening to my own breathing, heavy like someone pressing down on my chest. For the first time in my life, I saw my family as data. Time, actions, intent, outcome. And the truth was, they didn't just betray me. They calculated it. When you gather enough pieces, the truth stands naked, painful to look at, but impossible to look away from. While Alina was still drafting the report, Harper stood up and pulled out her own laptop. The afternoon light shimmered across her hair, a beautiful silver now dulled by stress. "I need to check something," she said quietly. I assumed she was checking her schedule or a document for me. But 5 minutes later, Harper turned back. Her face was chalk white. Her hands shook so badly she had to set the laptop down. "Ivy," her voice was ragged. "I think Russell took my money too." The room fell so silent I could hear the second hand on the wall clock. "How much?" I asked, though my heart already knew it wouldn't be small. Harper swallowed hard. $280,000. Almost a year now. My mind went blank, as if someone had carved a piece out of it. "He said he was investing for me," Harper said, lips trembling. I believed him. But there was never any investment. She held her forehead, and a single tear fell not from weakness, but from being insulted down to the bone. I took her hand and squeezed it. "Well, get everything back," I said. For the first time, my voice didn't shake. It was sharp as steel. Turns out I wasn't the only one destroyed. I was just the first one to notice. Alina gathered the documents. "We're doing 3 things immediately. 1, file a police report. 2, request account freeze orders. 3, initiate civil and criminal lawsuits." The way she said it made everything cold but clear. We went to the Naperville Police Department. The building smelled of new wood, with neon lights buzzing overhead. I signed the report. Financial exploitation and digital intrusion. Harper signed another. Retirement account misappropriation. The officer reading our files grew increasingly serious. "I'll forward this directly to the Financial Crimes Division," Alina whispered to me. "When the freeze orders go through, they'll know instantly." That night, Harper and I sat in the car. Outside the window, streetlights reflected off thin streaks of rain. I looked at my phone. No messages from Russell. No calls from Marianne. But Alina had warned. The banking system will send them a notification that the accounts are locked. I stared out at the road. Everything was quiet, frighteningly quiet. And when Russell's phone screen lit up with the notification that his accounts had been frozen, I knew. The worst part for him was still ahead. As for me, I was only just beginning to fight back. When the truth knocks on the door, a liar collapses without anyone having to expose him. The Chicago sky was thick gray, like it was warning of a storm that hadn't been named yet. I parked in front of Russell's house, Aunt Harper's SUV pulling up right behind mine, and a Naperville police car waiting quietly 1 house away. No sirens were needed. No noise. The truth alone was large enough to fill the space. Harper stepped out first, her long coat flipping slightly in the wind. Alina Cortez, the cyber fraud attorney, carried a thick folder under her arm, her expression sharp and cold. I inhaled deeply and walked up the steps. I rang the bell. The door opened. Russell appeared. His surprise performed so perfectly, it was unnecessary. "Ivy, you," Alina raised her attorney badge. Harper stood right behind me, her gaze sharp enough to pierce through Russell. No one said another word. The silence between the 3 of us became a complete accusation more powerful than any spoken charge. Sometimes silence is the sharpest blade. Alina opened the file once we were standing in the living room. The warm, honey-colored lights of the house couldn't mask the coldness crawling down my spine. "Mr. Russell Calder," Alina began. "These are the complete logs from the keylogger installed on your old laptop. Russell let out a thin laugh. Key what? I don't know what your Alina turned the laptop screen toward him. The installation timestamp. The data captured every password I typed. Timestamps matching the transfer times. IP addresses matching Russell's home Wi-Fi. Marianne lifted her hand to her mouth, eyes widening. Harper placed another stack of papers on the table. My retirement account statement. $280,000 gone. Same time frame as Ivy's money. Russell's face flushed red. I was just borrowing it. I'm trying to handle things for the family. That's not borrowing. Alina replied, her voice not loud but sharp as metal. That is misappropriation. And the intrusion into your daughter's computer is a federal offense. Right then, the police officer stepped inside through the back door. Mr. Russell Calder? We have a warrant to seize devices for investigation. Russell froze. His face drained of power, like every familiar performance he relied on suddenly stopped working. A bad man is only powerful when you're still afraid of him. Harper took one step forward, her voice low and hard. Russell, you never needed a family. You needed victims. Marianne broke down crying, unable to hold herself together. She gripped the edge of the table as if everything around her was collapsing. Footsteps echoed from the stairs. Logan stood there, hair messy, eyes red. Dad, is what Ivy said true? His voice shook. You ruined her. Ruined Aunt Harper. Who are you trying to ruin next? Russell opened his mouth, but no sound formed. The silence from Logan, Harper, and me made him shrink in the eyes of the very people who once believed him the most. Marianne turned to Russell, horror filling her eyes. You took Harper's money. Truly? Russell looked away. Not answering was an answer. When illusions collapse, only the truth remains standing. I straightened my back and looked at Russell with the calmness you reserve for a stranger who never truly existed in your life. I don't belong here anymore. No yelling. No tears. Just a final sentence. Alina signed the confirmation for device seizure. The officers followed Russell into the office to collect the second device. Harper placed her hand on my shoulder. Let's go. Ivy. We stepped onto the porch. Logan rushed forward, grabbing my hand. When this is over, can I come live with you? I didn't turn around, but I nodded. The wind blew, making the curtains inside tremble. The door closed behind me soft. Yet to me, it sounded like the final punctuation of a chapter of my life. As I walked away from that house, I knew the confrontation had only revealed the tip of the iceberg. The submerged part, everything Russell had done to the entire family, would explode in the days ahead. Consequences don't always crash down loudly. Sometimes they fall softly, and that softness hurts even more. 3 days after the confrontation, my phone buzzed while I was sitting in a quiet cafe near my new apartment. A message from Alina Cortez. The court approved it. Russell's accounts are fully frozen. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Not happy. Not sad. Just clear. Midwest Federal Bank sent an additional report. Password matched. 2-factor authentication matched. IP from Russell's house. All transactions identified as fraudulent under coercive access. Marianne texted me almost every day. You misunderstood. Our family needs to talk again. Why would you do this to your father? I didn't reply. Because the real question was, why did they do that to me? One afternoon, Harper sent me a photo of Russell walking into the Naperville police station. No handcuffs. No cameras. Just a middle-aged man, shoulders slumped, stepping through the glass doors as if the whole world had collapsed inward around him. You don't need to take revenge on someone who destroyed you. The truth does it for you. The following week, the court issued a ruling. Sell the house to compensate the damages. A place once full of artificial laughter turned into a battlefield of paperwork. Cardboard boxes scattered across the floor. Marianne cried as legal staff placed seals on the cabinet doors. Harper received the remaining portion of her retirement account, not the full $280,000. But not zero either. I received a confirmation email from the corporate bank. The $96,000 had been restored. Logan packed his things and quietly left the house. That night, the three of us, Harper, Logan, and I sat in the kitchen of Harper's new apartment. Logan stirred his cocoa. Harper drank mint tea. And I looked at the two of them and realized, family isn't the name you were born into. Family is who sits beside you when everything falls apart. Sometimes loss is just the space big enough for something new to enter. I returned to my desk in my sunlit apartment. The new pitch deck lay open on my screen. Harper sat beside me, checking every expense line. She had officially become the interim CFO. Logan handled small tasks, organizing documents, running errands, and learning how to manage the schedule. He did it with a seriousness I had never seen before. The returned funds allowed me to relaunch NorthLine Analytics. New algorithms, clean datasets, and most importantly, a boundary no one could ever cross again. When our second seed round was approved, I leaned back in my chair and took a deep breath. I realized Russell could no longer touch my future. A broken family is sometimes just the beginning of another family, a freer one. Russell now lives in a small rental apartment on the edge of Naperville, a place where no one asks, and no one cares. Marianne no longer plays the role of strong mother. She sent Logan a long string of messages, receiving only a short reply. I need time. Russell stared at his phone screen but typed nothing. He knew. Every door had closed. But what I didn't know yet was this true peace doesn't come from getting your money back. It comes from getting yourself back. Sometimes an ending isn't a period, but the first breath of a new life. That morning, Chicago sunlight slipped through the blinds, painting the warm streak of gold across the kitchen. I poured myself a cup of chamomile tea and inhaled deeply. For the first time in many months, my heartbeat wasn't defending itself. My phone vibrated. Not a blame-filled message. Not a bank alert. Just the final email from the Illinois court. All procedures have been completed. I stared at that line for a long time. Some part of me became lighter without even trying. Logan texted, "I'm doing okay. Thank you for not leaving me behind." A moment later, Harper appeared at the door with a bag of bread and 2 cups of hot coffee. No long speech. No interrogation. She simply set everything on the table and smiled, the kind of smile that told me I was no longer alone. Family isn't blood. Family are the people who stay when the storm has passed. I no longer seek revenge. I only want a life where no one has the right to touch my future again. And today, I finally did it. This story ends, but my journey toward freedom has only begun. Please like and subscribe so I can share more meaningful and inspiring stories with you. See you in the next video.